Now, in my last video, I said that I was going to offer up, like, my ultimate advice on dealing with rejection. Like, and I find myself ethically conflicted about sharing this quote-unquote advice, because some of it is ethically questionable, if I'm honest, and looking back, I'm not entirely certain that I did the right thing. In fact, I feel like I probably didn't. And, I think that if I give this advice, well, as advice, I might be doing the wrong thing myself. Again. So, but I will provide it because, I'll tell the story of what happened to me, and then you can make your own decision about what you want to do. Okay, so some years back, I was hanging out with a Christian group, and there was this guy there who was just amazing. He was so beautiful and so smart and so funny and so creative. And, physically he was just my type. And, in terms of humor, it felt like I was talking to my brother, and, he even smelt like my brother. He smelt like home. And so I developed a crush on him, and I had a crush on him for about a year, but I didn't really act on it because I was already in the middle of a fairly troubled relationship that I hoped would succeed. So I didn't leave, but I was thinking about this other guy a lot of the time. And but eventually that relationship ended organically. So I was like, well, okay, I'm single now. And, I ended up running into the guy through a set of bizarre coincidences that made me think it was an act of God. And I thought, well, okay, I'm going to try to date him. And it seemed like, things were going like miraculously well. Like there were things happening that to me, again, seemed like acts of God bringing he and I together. So I was like just head over heels over this guy. I was crazy about him. But then he stood me up, and then he ghosted me. Now, back at the time, I was much more insecure of myself than I am now. So the whole situation just destroyed me. Emotionally, I was a wreck, for at least a year afterwards. And, it was the sort of thing where I was doing well in other areas of life. My business was gradually growing, and, home-wise, okay, things weren't great, but they were better than they had been in the past. And, just there were things about my life that were getting better, but whenever he would, I'd remember this guy, I would just feel like I wanted to die, like I was that distressed over what had happened. And, so, and not only that, I had tried moderate, ordinary ways of trying to get over him, but it was this difficult thing where I would start to get over him, I would start to feel better, and then he would do something that would make me think he was still into me and that he was going to retract his rejection of me. So I'd get all excited again and try to get things going with him again, and then he'd reject me again. And this happened over and over and over for the course of about, yeah, that year. And, till eventually it became clear to me that he definitely didn't care about me. You know, I that I had misread some of his behaviors around me to mean that he cared about me and liked me, when actually he was treating me like I was the least important person in the world in a lot of ways. And so, a point came where I found indications also that he had lied to me, that he had claimed that a particular friend of his was only his friend, when in fact she was his girlfriend. And I was, so hurt and so incensed. And not only that, a lot of friends who had initially been supportive of me, I think gradually lost their patience and just couldn't stand to listen to me talking about it anymore. And, they became increasingly harsh. And so I was at breaking point, and eventually I just said, I have to do whatever it takes to survive. I have to do whatever it takes. And so what began was I would say a few months of me radically reprogramming my brain. And, I mean, one of the first things that happened was that I began to latch a hold of my friends a lot tighter than I had in the past. I worked a lot harder than I ever had before to find other men to feel attracted to. I cut the guy off completely. As in, I went through every social media platform where I had him, and I blocked him. And I even blocked some of our mutual contacts. I unfriended some of our mutual friends. I did whatever it took to just feel like he was 100%, in fact 200% dead to me. I even started to refuse to go to certain parts of my home city just to make sure that I was lowering my odds of running into him. That was how determined I was. And not only that, but I began to use certain brain training techniques to deprogram myself of him. Like, if he appeared in my mind, because this was a problem I kept having. I kept remembering things that I did with him or things that he had said, and so every time the image of how beautiful he had seemed to me appeared in my mind, I would do things like imagining that I was just looking at a photo and holding it in my hands and then tearing it into little pieces. Or if he appeared in my mind at all, I would imagine myself telling him to just go away and then grabbing a hold of him and then throwing him so far that he would become a tiny little speck in the distance. I kept, programming, telling my brain to imagine myself throwing him out of my brain, erasing him out of my brain, right, sometimes I even did the thing of writing his name down on a piece of paper and then tearing the piece of paper up and throwing it in the trash. And I also took all of the objects I had that had anything to do with him, and cut them into tiny little pieces and threw them in the trash. I really wanted to 100% burn my bridges behind me as far as he was concerned. Not simply because I wanted to eradicate him from my heart, but also because I knew that if I did all of this, I would feel so ashamed and fearful of him and and his friends and the consequences of my actions that I would never ever be able to go back. Even if I wanted, I would never be able to. And, what I found was that once I had completely blocked and deleted him, there was a bizarre level of relief, because what I knew about him was that he was in the habit of spending a great deal of time on the internet, and he spent a great deal of that time focused on his core group of friends and ghosting me. And this wounded me a lot. This really, really hurt me. And I, looking back, I can say that maybe it came from a place of insecurity on his part, because in some ways he was a very insecure person. But ultimately I did come to, like, even though it worked, even though pressing myself into this mold consistently, and also binge watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood so that I could restore the empty love tank I had by going through that situation of being ghosted over and over and over again, and of just being so hurt that way. And, yeah, there was just so many hurtful things that happened. And, okay, one of the things that helped was that a point came where he actually drew a really bad picture of himself. And I, for a period of time, I actually kept that picture in my computer so that whenever I, whenever I saw him, whenever I saw him in my mind, I could go and look at the picture and go, no, you're thinking he's beautiful, but actually he looks like that. And, Okay, one of the more extreme things I did was I intentionally became romantically involved with somebody who resembled him, both in terms of appearances and personality and skills. And what I did was every time I would find myself remembering something of the dates or time that I had spent with the guy that I had been rejected by, I would instead imagine an ex-boyfriend or the new guy that I was sort of hanging out with in his position instead. So it was like my memories of him were getting painted over literally by other people. And you know, even in memories where I can't perfectly do that, I will still try to focus on other details in the memory that have nothing to do with him. And, you know, so yes, I mean, these tactics even then, even after a year, still didn't 100% work, by the way. I got to a point eventually where my brain had become convinced that he was a figment of my imagination, and that was its way of coping with what had happened. You know, to just decide that it never did, even though I consciously know that that's not true. But yeah, um, even all of this didn't 100% get me over the guy. Part of what helped was going through some other smaller rejections with other guys who I found at least as, if not greatly more attractive than the guy who had hurt me. And that's the thing, like, if you focus, you can find people who may resemble them, but are not them. And, you know, um, having gone through all of that, I do feel as though I am over him. I came, like, a year ago, when I came across him, I was so terrified of him that I went to the bathroom about 12 times in one day. I was so terrified just to have to deal with him. But then, this year, I crossed paths with him again, and while I'm not proud at how I had to treat him as a stranger, and I'm not proud of how I wasn't able to achieve proper reconciliation, I can proudly say that I got over him enough that I could be in, you know, that I walked past him without dying of a panic attack. You know, I was able to, and you know, I only saw him for a brief moment, but in that moment where I saw him, yeah, I could see that he had been falling apart. Like, his appearance was just deteriorating. And, you know, I don't take pleasure in that. I do feel sorry for how he looked and how haggard he was, but by the same token, this is somebody who deeply, deeply wounded me, and I'm glad to be free of that pain and misery. And I find it a little sad that it took two different crushes on two different guys to truly eradicate this person from my heart. And even then, there's like a teeny tiny little shred left, but it's small enough that I don't suffer. It's small enough that it doesn't really hurt me on a day-to-day basis. I mean, I still find that the level of pain and rejection that I felt from this guy impacts some of my interactions with people, but on the other hand, because I was so determined to do whatever it took to get over him, I kept making myself spend time with lots and lots of different kinds of people. And as a consequence, I was able to, to overcome, to not allow him to rule my heart and spirit. As I said at the start, I don't know that I believe these methods are ethical. I think that lying to oneself, even with, you know, even if it's a very good lie, is just not good for you. I think it's better to face reality and then make reality as good as you can make it, and I think that should be fair enough. Now, I'm very tired. I've nearly fallen asleep like a few times while making this video, and I think I do also look incredibly tired. So I'm going to stop the video about here. And yeah, just, you know, have a think, about whether or not you think I did the right thing. I personally don't. I think deception is wrong, and I think that advancement you achieve in life by hurting others is probably not advancement worth achieving, and probably not advancement at all, really. But, make of it what you will, and, yeah, have a good night or a good day wherever you are in the world. Take care of yourself. Bye!